here we go again, another fresh-ass video for your viewing enjoyment. Today we're going to be taking a quick look at multiple Wii games that use the Zapper gun, an irresistibly sexy hunk of plastic that does nothing at all aside from hold your controller so you don't have to, you lazy piece of shit. Now, none of the games I'm going to be looking at require the Zapper since it offers no real functionality aside from existing, such is the case with basically any Wii peripheral like the Mario Kart wheel of bullshit, though it does provide a trigger that pushes the B button on the remote for you when you press it, but it definitely does add a degree of fun to most games that suggest the use of the Zapper and makes these titles feel more like you're playing in the arcade, as long as the game isn't a piece of total shit, which some are. I've been wanting to make this video since I got my Wii and a PlayStation 3 from a good pal of mine, Mr. Thomas Jenkins, who sent these consoles over with a bunch of other goodies seen here. He even sent me dog treats. Thank you, sir. Speaking of Mr. Jenkins, by the way, he's got a YouTube channel as well called Dragon Pixels, and we'll link to a couple of his videos below. He's got one on Gamera, which is a Godzilla game for the Game Boy, and another on an At Games Sega Genesis knockoff that was officially licensed by Sega. Check those out. Again, links will be below. Now, today we're going to be talking about some Wii Zapper games. That's this bad boy right here. And what this is a giant hunk of plastic that does nothing but hold your Wii controller and nunchuck and does nothing else. But some games were built around that, so we're going to take a look at those games. I'll be taking a brief look at 4 games: Link's Crossbow Training, Chicken Riot, Dead Space Extraction, and Target Terror, or as I like to call it, Target Total Bullshit, because it's horrible. I can't even come up with anything funny to call it because it sucks so bad I don't even care. I don't even care. I'll also be covering Sega's Ghost Squad more in-depth, a game where you straight up murder maybe 1,000 humans because they're begging you for death and you give them what they crave. And I played through the entire game and felt it deserved a little more time than these other titles. Not because it's a better game, but mostly because it's a way better game. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, my last video was a playthrough of these minus Ghost Squad, which I'll be uploading that soon since I completed it and wanted to give it the attention it deserves instead of lumping it together with a hodgepodge of other games. But if you're interested in seeing these games a little more in depth, go watch that video after this one if that tickles you pink. I'll link to that below along with the other links. Now, enough of my bullshit, let's get on with it, starting with Link's Crossbow Training. Now, Link's Crossbow Training could be likened to Wii Sports in that Wii Sports was bundled in with the Wii to sell millions of those consoles, and this was bundled in with the Wii Zapper in order to sell those as well. Now, this game serves as sort of a demo on what the peripheral can be used to do, and I think it does a pretty good job showcasing that. Now, this game was released in North America, Europe, and in Australia in 2007, and weirdly enough, it came to Japan afterwards in 2008. At first glance, you could think that this game is a standard arcade shooter like Hogan's Alley or Duck Hunt, just some levels you played through while shooting some targets, and if you thought that, you would actually be 100% correct on what this game is. It's incredibly simple and devoid of any real story, even though that was the original intention when Nintendo first started working on this game and intended it to be a spin-off from Twilight Princess. Instead, it ended up using assets like some stage design and items found throughout the world of that game. There is no real coherency to the levels. You have a selection of stages available to you at any given time, and you can choose any stage that you've currently unlocked to play in any order. As you progress and earn medals with your score in almost every case, if not all cases, I can't say for sure as I did not complete the game, a bronze medal will typically be enough to open up the next stage for you to play. In most levels that you select, in which there are 9 total, there are 3 sub-stages for you to play through and increase your score through all 3 as you try to earn that coveted shiny medal that you can show to your parents to make them love you. Easy enough, right? Before each sub-stage, there will be a description of your goal in that particular stage. These can range from shooting targets to shooting enemies before they attack you and hurt your score, as well as having to seek out and destroy a certain amount of enemies within a time limit using the nunchuck analog stick to move. There are also a few boss stages which I did not reach in time for this video because I suck at video games. In almost every instance, you will be racing against the clock in order to get the highest score possible. The faster you shoot, the more targets you'll have access to in the time frame, which will allow you to achieve higher scores. Accuracy is a big factor here as well. The less you miss your target, the higher your score multiplier will grow as you hit multiple targets in a row. If you miss a target, your multiplier resets back to 0. It's fairly standard stuff here, and there's nothing really innovative going on either. There are 2 different ways to shoot shoot. You have a standard shot performed by pulling the trigger, or a bomb arrow that can be shot by holding down the trigger for a few seconds, then releasing. You also have a zoom function that you can use by pressing the Z button on the nunchuck, but I found this to be disorienting at times, and if you use it too much, you'll end up missing targets you couldn't even see on screen, because you're zoomed in. I'd suggest only using this sparingly on incredibly far away objects, and only when there's no other targets on screen, because this will totally ruin your run if you aren't in and out of zoom as quickly as possible. There's also bonus targets like scarecrows or pottery you can shoot between targets to raise your score, but these are usually only worth a few points each, so it's not worth risking any actual targets on screen trying to get at these. As it's a game from Nintendo, you can expect the graphics to look nice, and they do, and they fit right in with the Twilight Princess's graphical style, since it's from that era of Zelda. The music is also very Zelda. If you've played Zelda, you know what I mean. If you haven't, well, that sucks and I can't help you. Wrapping this one up, basically, it can be insanely fun at times, and scoring points can be all over the place. A slightly better run on a stage can net you a shitload more points if you miss targets less, and so perfection is kind of the key here. I think it was IGN that said in their review that using the Wii Zapper actually makes this game more difficult than just holding the remote and nunchuck, and that might be the case, but that wasn't the intended way for this game to be played. I liked using the Wii Zapper with it, it just wasn't easy, and I'm sure that was intentional to add a little more replayability to it, as it is so short, but I think Nintendo should have made the targets a little larger and used some sort of aim assist to lock you to a target when you're hovered over it, but that's more or less a personal preference. This game requires incredibly steady hands, which I don't have because I'm an alcoholic, so nailing these targets can be ridiculously difficult. While it isn't the most refined shooting you can get with a zapper, it does work and is mostly more enjoyable than frustrating. Ultimately, I liked this one and it's fun, and I'll go back and finish it eventually, as it was the second best zapper game I played for this video. Check this one out if you have a Wii and you're bored. It's a good way to kill a few hours if you don't want to think about anything else but just playing a game and trying to win. So what's next? Well, Target Terror, baby. Now this is a port of an arcade game originally developed by Raw Thrills and released in arcades in 2004. Now it's very similar to Area 51 if you ever played that one. If you remember Area 51, that game is a classic. I loved it. But yeah, I remember playing this one too in arcades and thinking that it was actually pretty good. So how did this hold up being ported to the Wii? Well, to put it bluntly, this game sucks ass. I know that's not very professional, but there is absolutely no other way to put that. Now, this game was published by Konami for the Wii and released in 2008. Let's take a look at this shit real quick. Like I said, I remember the arcade version of this being fun, but the version on the Wii is the opposite of what fun is. It's tedious, non-stop action, and in this case, action that's bad, like any of the Michael Bay Ninja Turtles movies, because you'll be taking damage every second, and the game seems so poorly designed around the motion controls that you are unable to stop the constant beatdown you'll be receiving. It's like being in high school all over again, but somehow way worse. But okay, you want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. It only takes a few moments of gameplay before you realize what you're in for here. There's no natural difficulty ramp up, as gamers know it. It just throws you right into it with enemies that can instant hit you the moment they appear on screen. There are enemies constantly throwing difficult to shoot grenades and dynamite at you. The reload function isn't really functional at all, requiring you to aim off screen and fire like you would in the arcade. However, here it only works maybe 50% of the time because the Wii controller is not a light gun and works far differently. Obviously, this game could have been programmed far better to compensate for this, but the devs couldn't be bothered to update this game so that it functions better with this different controller. I'm not sure if this is how the arcade game handles it, but in this version, if you miss a reload off screen, the game just reloads your gun for you anyway on the next shot, because even the developers knew that the controls they implemented in this game are horrible. Basically, the story here is you're a one-man army apparently in charge of wiping out every terrorist on the entire planet that are entirely aware of who you are and what you're trying to do, and are all trying to kill you at once. You would think that if stopping terrorists was so important, the police or the CIA or whoever's in charge here would send more than just one person to stop it, but not in Target Terror. Nope, it's just you, and you suck at your job, and you definitely never aced any of your exams at the firing range. And if you don't rage quit first, you still more than likely won't get through the game, since you get 30 continues, which seems like a lot until you realize that's to play through 10 long stages, and you'll burn through like 6 continues just on the first stage. So do the math there. There's a reason that this game gives you so many continues, and that's because the devs knew how poorly they ported it, and I'll say that's not nearly enough continues to get through this trash. On top of that, the graphics look like garbage, and if I have to hear that weird mid-stroked out voice saying, reload, one more time, well, I'm not gonna do jack shit. I just don't like it. It's annoying.
Reload.
Really though, Target Terror isn't so bad. Just kidding, it's horrible. Skip this game, that's all. Worst game on this list by a mile, and one of the worst games ever made.
Now let's take a look at a game that's not nearly as bad. In fact, it's okay. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible either. We're talking about Chicken Riot here, and Chicken Riot is a game where you play as a thin-skinned redneck who is upset that some chickens threw eggs at you, I guess, and embarrassed you. So your main mission now is to go around and kill as many chickens as you possibly can. I guess. Whatever, that's fine.
By far the most simple and family-friendly game on this list, well, I suppose as long as you aren't offended by murdering poultry, is Chicken Riot. Unlike Target Terror, which was an arcade game, this is actually an arcade game experience on the Wii without originating from the actual arcade, and it's straightforward, but unlike Target Butthole, it generally works. It's also a little bit more forgiving than Link's crossbow training, and the premise here is simple. Kill every living thing you see in the game. That's it. It's open season on anything living, and you gain score by killing it all. Okay, there's a little bit more to it than that, but not much. Each stage drops you in one large area, and in each area you will be bombarded by enemies and you take them all out, and then the scene will shift to a new part of the area and you do it again. Throughout you will find golden eggs which increase your score, or other bonuses like additional weapons with limited ammo that upon shooting these upgrades take immediate effect. Everything you kill here are chickens, and there's a few variations but not many. Some come at you and attack you directly, while others will hang back and throw eggs at you, which kicked off this entire fiasco in the first place. As you proceed through the stages, you'll come across bosses, which will later just become standard enemies, and these are lame and outdated even at the time of this game's release. Some of these bosses are chicken agents, similar to the agents found in The Matrix, and Terminator chickens, obviously from the Terminator movies. When you finish each stage, the next one starts and you do it again. There's some fun moments here, and there are a lot of destructible items in the environments to increase your score. There's also a somewhat annoying but not too horrible chick that likes calling out all the items you pick up or what is going on in the stage.
You have found a golden egg. Level completed.
She's got like a total of 8 different things she says, so she can get annoying quick. The graphics on this one are decent enough. They aren't very flashy, and they definitely aren't going to win any awards, but they get the job done, and they're colorful and cartoony enough to be endearing to a certain degree. The music is annoying hillbilly music with banjos and whatever else. It's pretty annoying, but it's not nearly as bad as the entirety of Target Terror, so we can forgive it for being a basic bitch. I can't suggest that anyone go out and buy this one unless you get it for a rock bottom price, but it's not a horrible game by any means. It does everything exactly to the point of acceptable and stops there. It's mediocre but playable. If you got a soft-modded Wii and a Zapper, this is definitely worth downloading and spending an hour or so with it, and that's essentially all there is to say about it.
Jesus Christ, standing on this floor and playing this. Okay.
Alright, so the next game I'm going to be taking a look at today is an on-rail shooter called Dead Space Extraction. Now, this was developed by EA Redwood Shores and Eurocom, and it was published by Electronic Arts in 2009. Now, I spent very little time with this. I couldn't get past all of the cutscenes and whatnot. The beginning was just so tumultuous, I just didn't want to stick with it. But I'm not going to give any kind of review of this or whatnot. I'm just going to give a brief rundown of the game, my experience with it very briefly, and what the game looks like, and what it plays like, and what the controls are like, stuff like that. Let's roll, baby. Let's get into it.
That's terrible. Try leaving around. That's better.
Sorry, Lexine. I was next to the recharging station. Are you calling about tonight?
No, because then it wouldn't be a surprise. I'm mad at you, Sam Caldwell.
Why?
Because you somehow forgot to tell me what you're doing today.
It's just a routine excavation.
Routine? You're extracting a marker. My supervisor Leon's nuts with excitement. Did you know he's a unitologist? This is a big deal.
I almost feel bad including this one in my video because I hardly played it, but I do have footage of it, so at least I want to show what this game is for those that might be interested in it or that love the Dead Space series. So let's talk about this one real quick before we get into Sega's Ghost Squad. The beginning tutorial goes on for what seems like some 45 minutes, and maybe you'll like that, maybe you won't, and this is interspersed with cutscenes that to me were uninteresting. I've read that this isn't relegated to just the beginning of the game, but how the game is from start to finish, so if you like more story than gameplay, perhaps you'll like this. You do not control your character's movement in any way here. You only control his weapons and other functions. You do have a standard shot as well as a secondary shot that you can pull off by holding the zapper sideways and firing. You can reload with the Z button, and there's a quick reload mechanic here if you can pull off the timing similar to Gears of War. You can also shake the zapper to illuminate your surroundings with what is called the glowworm, which reminds me of one of those toys from the 80s and 90s. Anyone remember glowworms? Anyway, after the tutorial, I was finally thrown into some action and shot at an undead freak that came at me with a knife, followed by some of his buddies, but at this point, I was ready to move on from this one. The graphics seem okay for the Wii, and the sound design is pretty good, and that's about all I can really say on this one, since I stopped playing it shortly after I encountered a few enemies, but I'll wrap this up by saying this one got fairly decent reviews by multiple outlets, such as IGN, so don't write this one off just because I didn't particularly enjoy my time with it. I just didn't like standing there waiting an eternity for things to start happening. I'll wrap this one up by showing a few snippets of gameplay to give you a better idea of what the game is like.
That thing's gotta be man-made.
Hurry up! Cooper's already pissed off that we're late.
Shit, sounds like someone's in trouble. Hold on!
Wait a second, we don't know what's going on in there. What the fuck?
And finally, we have Ghost Squad. Now, this was... This was released in arcades in 2004. Sega developed and published it then, and for the Wii version, it was developed by Polygon Magic, and Sega published it in 2007. Alright, and that's for US and Japan. Now in Australia and Europe, they got it a year later. Enough with this shit, guys. Let's just get into this game. It kicks ass.
So you start out Ghost Squad by entering your name, and as I found out the hard way, the name Piss is unacceptable, so it changed my name to Ghost Squad without giving me the chance to pick another name. That is so cool. The story starts with you and a team of hard-boy soldiers busting in the door of some villa that is apparently a terrorist vacation retreat, and the killing begins immediately, which is exactly how I like it. You can also tell right from the get-go that this has your standard so bad it's great voice acting that Sega is known for, and it's awesome here.
Hands in the air! I'm not a terrorist!
And what we also have here is a game that has been fine-tuned to work with the Wii Zapper, as aiming and shooting is silky as hell and much more forgiving than, say, a game like Target Terror, which just tried to be a one-for-one recreation of the arcade without accounting for the Wii Remote's shortcomings compared to a light gun and failed embarrassingly hard. It's obvious that Sega and Polygon Magic actually took the time to make this game work well on the Wii, and work well it does. I accidentally turned off the on-screen crosshair and played through the game without it, and still did reasonably well, which seems almost unfathomable doing that with most Zapper games. I'm almost positive this game must use some form of subtle aim assist so you aren't constantly missing every shot, as it definitely feels like where you're aiming is where the gun is shooting. It's very forgiving, but not to such a degree that the game is a cakewalk. It's still difficult enough, but it definitely feels like the game has an idea of what you're trying to do and does its best to make sure you do it. It's very intuitive, and it takes your mind off the controls so you can focus more on the actual gameplay, which is how it should be with with these types of games. In fact, the only Wii Zapper game I played during this session that felt like it actually did this correctly was this game. As with the other games I played for this video, I always felt like the controls were slightly off, and I found myself focusing more on getting the Zapper in the right position than I was on the game objective for most of the time, and that includes Link's crossbow training, where I always felt like I lost my positioning with the Zapper and had to fiddle with the Zapper to get my crosshair back to where I wanted it, and that's just not the case here. Speaking of controls, it's pretty basic and works well for the game, and in my opinion, the simpler these games keep the controls, the better off they are. You fire with the trigger or the B button if you aren't using the Zapper, and you reload by shaking the Zapper, and it works insanely well, and you'll never be struggling to reload like you would if you were playing a much worse game, like, I don't know, Target Terror. The Z button on the nunchuck acts as the action buttons such as opening doors or uncuffing hostages, or in some cases throwing grenades. You can also switch between any guns you might have picked up along the way with the analog stick on the nunchuck. That's pretty much all there is to it, and it's the best scheme available for this type of game on the Wii. This is light years ahead of Target Terror in terms of playability, and the reload mechanic works exactly as it should. As you play through each stage, the game will give you an objective update to let you know what you're trying to accomplish in that particular stage. Most, you'll be tracking a head terrorist in each stage and get a briefing of the main enemy either right before you fight him or at the beginning of the stage. And while searching for that nasty boy, you'll be killing hundreds of his henchmen along the way. Usually multiple times in each stage, you'll get choices as to what objectives you would like to accomplish next, such as killing more terrorists or searching specific rooms, taking specific paths, or searching certain rooms for a subject, or freeing hostages. If you choose to free hostages, you have to take care not to shoot them, and instead you need to aim at them and press a button at the prompt to uncuff them and set them free. If you free enough hostages, you'll win that round and move on to the next part of the stage. The enemies here are your standard terrorist stereotypes wearing sunglasses and camo or rags all over their faces, and there's definitely not a ton of variety in the enemies you'll be slaughtering here, maybe only 5 enemy types total, but to give this game credit, it looks loads better than the realistic digitized sprites used in games like Target Terror. This looks more akin to Virtua Cop, another Sega game, or even Time Crisis from Namco, and the shooting feels a lot like how I remember Time Crisis being, just minus the gun recoil and the ducking mechanic. Throughout each stage, the environments are mostly destructible and reveal power-ups hidden throughout, and grabbing these will grant you extra health or additional gun options, and you don't need to use them right away, only when you want to, which is an added bonus. You'll find shotguns, machine guns, and other weapons along the way to help you kill as many people as humanly possible on your way through the game. There will also be short bonus sections in the levels that require you to kill a mini-boss or take up a sniper rifle and shoot a specific target or a certain number of targets using that weapon. It's all very fun, and it's never frustrating. The level design is also varied, with one taking place in a secluded villa in the woods, another has you fighting through Air Force One, and another in a jungle, then on a river in a speedboat chase. Yes, there's only 3 levels to be found, but the game is so entertaining, and it's the perfect length for an arcade shooter that you hardly notice that it's so short. It never overstays its welcome, and that's a good thing. In fact, you could probably beat this entire game in the amount of time it takes for Dead Space Extraction to even get through the opening cutscenes, so that's either a major win for this game or a major strike against that one. Either way, this game wins. When you complete each stage, you'll get a breakdown of your success and failures for each portion of the stage and what choices you made going through each stage, then you'll be awarded a score. The bosses in Ghost Squad are a highlight and are unique battles for each one. In the first stage, you'll go up against a boss named Havoc who's trying to escape in a helicopter, and the way to defeat him is to make sure you keep the gun on his helicopter long enough for your missile launcher to get a lock on him, then you fire at him. Do this multiple times and he goes down, but if you keep missing or take too long, you'll keep taking damage. The second boss is fairly simple as long as you don't mess up. His name is Simone, and he's got a grenade that threatens to blow Air Force One out of the sky. All you gotta do is act quick and shoot him in the head. Finally, the last boss you'll be destroying, his armored boat, then you'll need to attack his shield with grenades and take him out before the timer runs out. Just like any arcade-based shooter, this one has its fair share of cheap shots where enemies will appear seemingly out of nowhere and hit you instantly, and as much as that sucks, it's par for the course. It doesn't happen very frequently here. When you take too much damage, the game obviously ends, but you have an unlimited number of continues, so playing through this one is never a problem. In fact, it's the opposite, because it's so much fun to play. And even though it's a great game, there are a few flaws, but nothing I can't get over. One thing I complained about in my run-through is that some enemies can be difficult to see, and Again, this is done on purpose, I assume, for a majority of the game, as guys hide behind furniture and other objects, and you won't notice they're there until they hit you. Also, some scenes in the later 2 levels can be darkened areas, and it'll be difficult to see enemies there as well. I also didn't like the way you can fail at the last boss, but still essentially beat the game while getting what I can only refer to as a seriously shitty ending. When really, I think that what should happen is you lose a life and get to try them again in order to get it right. But as far as nitpicks go, that's essentially the only problems I have with this game. Well, and aside from the fact I can't name my character Piss, but other than that, this game is nearly flawless at what it's trying to attempt on the Wii. And on top of all that goodness, the soundtrack in Ghost Squad is also awesome and exactly what you would expect from a Sega arcade shooter or just a Sega game in general. Sega is usually on point with their music, and this one is no exception. The music is upbeat techno and fits the game perfectly, and I like that. There's also a lot of added replayability with the leveling system, and as you play through the game, you level up your character, which unlocks new weapons and outfits that can be then used on your next playthrough. This character level is consistent across your many playthroughs, so anything you unlock in one playthrough will carry over into the next one, so the more that you play, the more candy you get. Bottom line on this one, play it. This game is amazeballs. But in all seriousness, I really liked it, and it's a blast to play. At the very least, download this one and put it on an SD card and give it a playthrough. You can thank me later.
Alright guys, you made it to the end of the video. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for watching this far. Now look, just a debrief, like this is not scripted, this is just off the cuff here because I'm a bad boy like that. But like look, okay, so I got the list in front of me here. We got Link's crossbow training, Chicken Riot, and Dead Space Extraction. If I had to guess, well, not guess, but Dead Space Extraction, I just can't say for sure. I just feel like if you like cinematics and whatever, it'll fit into this group. Those are good games to get. Chicken Riot is kind of whatever, very family friendly. You're just killing a bunch of chickens, but it works well. Link's crossbow training, I feel like it's got some accuracy issues. It's one of those games where you're going to be hoping that the crosshair on the screen lines up with the zapper while you're pointing it at the screen. Basically, the entire time you play, that kind of sucks. But for the most part, those are good games. Target Terror is just absolutely awful, and I suggest you avoid that pretty much, you know, at all costs. Don't spend your money on that. You can download it if you just want to check out how shitty a game can actually be. That might be worth looking at just for that. And Ghost Squad is just awesome. That's a really good game. So Ghost Squad is amazing, whether you have the Zapper or not. That's worth picking up, just regardless, get it. That's all for today. Thank you guys for watching this video. I will see you on the next one.
Let me tell y'all about one of my favorite things. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Just a bunch of dudes making each other feel cool. Let's go, baby. Hanging with the boys, going to the carnival. Gonna kiss some cotton candy. High five my best buds and kiss them on the lips. But we're good pals. Nothing weird about that. Piss, piss shit. I love hanging with my bros at the carnival, talking about how much we love each other. I don't think that's weird. It's just piss, piss shit. Piss, piss shit.